there today. So, hey, by the way, look at the hip girl. So, hip replacement, doing great. She carries the cane around because she can strike me with it. She does not actually need it any longer. It is a true story. So, yeah. God is able to do incredible things these days through doctors and medicine, and we're grateful. So, as we continue on this series, I've been trying to pull in some, coaches and athletes and et cetera. And the guy we've got today, Patrick Harner, has stuff to his story that I'm sure I don't even know yet. But as we've talked, and I've known Patrick for a couple of years, and his sister and brother-in-law come to the park, so Patrick qualified to train at a very, very high level with the U.S. skeleton team. Now, y'all know what skeleton is? You go down an icy track with your head sticking out in front. Now, the first question I'm going to ask him is, are you nuts? I watched that thing in the Winter Olympics, and I'm like, those people are crazy. I didn't even like going down on a sled in snow facing forward, but I did it. But that was just snow. So Patrick's going to help us understand a little bit more about what it means to run the race of faith. So let's welcome Patrick up here, would you? So, yeah, we were checking earlier. One of our stools has a crack through the seat, and Stephanie was a little worried. And I said, the man used to go down an icy hill with his head out. Who cares about a crack in a seat? I mean, seriously, is it, So what causes somebody to do this?
Yeah, great question, Jeff. Just real quick, thank you so much for allowing me to be here and worship with you guys this morning. The worship music was just powerful this morning. Gospel clearly proclaimed. It's awesome to be here, so thank you. Yeah, what possessed me to do that? So everyone mistakes me for a thrill seeker. They're like, Patrick, you're just crazy. You just love seeking thrills. I like having my feet on the ground. Like, you're never going to find me bungee jumping or skydiving or anything. I'm a very cautious person, but I take very...
all right, keep going.
I take very calculated risks. So I am actually not a huge fan of roller coasters. So, yeah, this is hilarious. So one thing I did to prepare was I started riding I forced myself on roller coasters because I'm very uncomfortable on roller coasters. But yeah, how did I get onto it? Well, I've always been interested in sports from the time I was a young kid. I mean, you could not keep a ball out of my hands or running through the woods. So in high school, I played football, baseball, basketball, track and field, cross country, soccer. I mean, I did it all. I ended up doing track and field in college. I played football in college as well, Division III. And after I graduated, I wanted to keep going. And something my dad suggested was like, well, instead of doing something that you're really not built for, I mean, I played football. Like, this is not a body for football. And I was a long jumper in track and field. Like, this is not a body for long jump.
Yeah, short legs, long jump. Yeah, that just doesn't really, yeah.
So I was like, what if I just start scouring the world for sports that are maybe more conducive to a short, powerful, fast man like myself. And I discovered skeleton. I mean, I discovered it in the Olympics watching it. And what was really appealing about it to me was the fast start. Is these guys sprint for about 20, 25 meters, and then they leap onto the sled. And I had grown up doing some really crazy things sledding. That's a story for another day. So I actually, the way you try out for skeleton is you send an application, and they say you're invited to try out. I mean, it's a very long process, but no one grows up doing skeleton. So they have to recruit people from all over the country.
Does Europe do skeleton on a regular basis?
Yes.
Much more than we do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like in Latvia, skeleton is huge. Like in Latvia, skeleton is equivalent to I don't know, I guess football here. It's a big deal. So that's how I got involved. I tried out, you have to do like a fitness competition, a fitness combine, which I traveled to Oklahoma City to do, which is really strange. And I competed in that, and my stats were good enough that I could continue on and actually try out for the development team.
So, and you continue to do stuff too, right? You do like the Spartan things and the Spartan runs, if you know what those are, and what's the thing that goes on down at King's Domain? What's it called?
Yeah, Mud, Guts, and Glory.
Mud, Guts, and Glory. So, didn't King's Domain just in down in Fort Ancient area? Yes. Didn't they just host like last year the World Championship or something like that?
Yeah, that's correct. They hosted the World Championships. I think it might have been 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
But yeah, so I do obstacle course racing. If you've ever heard of the Death Race, I'm one of the survivors. Very few people have finished that race. So I still compete at a pretty high level with obstacle course racing. But yeah.
And you somewhat drug your brother-in-law into, although he's kind of crazy too, because he played rugby.
Dan's crazier than I am. No one believes it, but Dan is actually crazier than I am.
So he may just not be as vocal about it. Maybe that's what happens. So training at an elite level, what do you have to say no to, and what do you have to say yes to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is not normal, but
somebody who trains for skeletons not normal, so that's all right.
What's always been appealing to me about sports is actually the process of getting to that level, the process that leads up to performance. So I had to say yes to that process over and over again.
And what did that kind of thing involve? I mean, seriously, just on a physical level, but a mental level as well. What do you have to do?
Well, nutrition.
Yep.
You've got to make the right choices with nutrition. Exercise, you have to make the right choices in exercise. And you have to be disciplined in those things. Some people can get away with, not great nutrition. Other people really have to be keyed in. There are days like everyone else when I wake up and I don't want to wake up and I don't want to train. But having to say yes, and once you make that yes, you take that step, and then once you're in the process, then it gets a little easier. Yeah. You have to say yes to pushing yourself to a very, very intense level. You have to say yes to getting criticism and feedback, which when I was younger was never easy.
And that's probably what I've learned in some of this study in this series. That's a lot of what separates really high athletes from just the so-sos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is being able to have somebody tell you that was not right, do it again, or it was right, do it 5 more times. It kind of goes both ways, but feedback is huge for an elite athlete.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I've had to say yes to, and this ties in with my spiritual journey as well, is what are my motivations and what am I saying yes to? What's motivating me? And there have been motivations that have not been good, that were very burdensome and even destructive when I didn't perform well, when I lost. And there were other motivations that were very positive and really freed me to compete, win or lose.
Okay. So how do you, as a Christian, how do you relate the Christian journey, the race of faith, with some of the things you learned as training as an elite athlete? How do what are some lessons that you applied in your own life?
Yeah, I think tying in with that motivational piece, when I was young, I had a mix of motivations. Part of my motivation for doing sports is I love movement and I love play and I love the process. But a huge part of motivation is, and I still am, and this is something Jesus has rescued me from and is still rescuing me from, is people pleasing. So performing to not just get the approval of others, but wanting to get their acclaim and wanting to get their praise. And when I didn't succeed in that, if I didn't win or I didn't perform up to someone else's standards, it just was crushing. So, in a really, very real sense, God has used sports as sort of this, to use a big theological word, he's used it to sanctify me. Sports has brought out the best in me and it's brought out the worst in me.
Right.
And he's been able to deal with that. One quick story, as far as motivation, is I had one of the lowest moments of my life in sports in college football. And I think this will paint paint a good contrast of where Jesus took me from point A to point B. And I was playing college football. It was my junior year. I'd worked my way up to a starting spot as a cornerback on the college team. And I completely blew a coverage. I dropped down into a zone coverage, and I was in the wrong zone. And the other team, about right before halftime, dropped the ball in right over my head. A guy was wide open, scored a touchdown, and I got bumped down to third string.
Oops.
And I spent and I've been working my butt off for 3 years to try to get the starting position. And so I dropped down to third string. I'm practicing week after week, getting lots of plays, trying to prove myself. And the coach comes up to me, the head coach, and he didn't speak to me very often. And I'm standing with all the other third string guys, which were freshmen and sophomore guys. And in the midst of the freshmen and sophomores, the coach looks at me right in the eyes. And he puts his hand on my shoulder. And he says, "Patrick." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is it. This is my moment. This is what I've been waiting for. Tell me, coach." He's like, "I left my jacket on the other end of the field. Can you go down there just real quick? Can you go down there and get my jacket?" And again, I'm a people pleaser. And so this destroyed me apart, but although it was temporarily destructive, but it was this real moment where I had a choice. I'm like, am I going to let this rule me, or Jesus, can you rescue me from this? And fast forward, competing in skeleton is like I didn't have any of those episodes. I had a lot of tough things happen to me, but instead of it devastating me, it turned into experiences where I was like, no, I can trust you, God. This is good, even if I lose, even if someone makes a weird comment like this to me. So
Love it. Love it. So the scripture today talks about competing according to the rules. Any thoughts on that, about how that has applied to your sports experience? Because you still do personal training too, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you stand on one of those balls, one of those exercise balls, without
Yes,
falling off?
I can. Wait, do you have a ball in the back or something?
No, I thought about it. I really did. I thought about it, and
Oh, good, because I can't.
yeah, I'm really jealous of that. But anyways, yeah, I'll figure it out, right? As long as I can put my hands on the ceiling, I'm all right.
Which I can't do.
Okay. So competing according to the rules. How have you applied that spiritually?
And that's a good question. So I've looked at the scripture. You told me about it a few weeks back. And I think what I've realized is really, I think the number one rule in Christianity is, as my dad would put it, will you open your whole life to Jesus in obedience? Will you open your whole life to him? One word that comes to mind, and Tim Keller, he's a pastor in New York City, he talks about this a lot, the Bible talks about it a lot, is idolatry. And going back to my motivations, what's motivating? What am I worshiping most? What am I placing at the topmost in my life? And if it's something other than Jesus, then I'm not competing. I'm not competing according to the rules.
According to the rules, because as an elite athlete, it's every day.
That's right.
I mean, it's not. Oh, I just don't feel like it today. It's going to take you 3 days to catch back up.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
you're
right.
behind already.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I think with that, and I think the good news is really, I mean, that's an impossible calling to be like Jesus, to follow Jesus. But as some of our songs are pointing out, is Jesus gives us grace. He empowers us with the Spirit. And when he empowers me with the Spirit, he's moving in me, then I can follow Jesus. And I think it's like this indestructible blueprint, because when I wake up, and there are days when I make bad decisions, I make bad choices, I don't follow Jesus, I don't love my wife well, love my kids well, etc., I can turn to Jesus and I say, Jesus, forgive me. Empower me to love like you love. Empower me to love my kids like you would love them.
And that, in a sense, is one of the rules,
That's right.
if you will.
Yes.
It works.
It works.
Rules are there because they work. They keep things. Yeah. Anybody can ask forgiveness.
Yes.
And it's there.
And that's the amazing
part
thing
of the
is and maybe this is a little bit of a distinction with sports and faith, is sports is like you have to summon up this energy and this strength, and God's like, well, let me carry that burden for you. Just ask for it, and I'm going to carry this for you. I'm going to empower you to do it.
Right.
So there's an active sense, but there's also this passive sense where God is the one completely at work.
Cool. Awesome. One last question. If you, as a personal trainer, if you only do, let's say, 3 exercises, and you do those 3 exercises every day, you're going to get really good at those 3 exercises,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not going to do what for you? What you got to mix it up, right?
Yeah, that's a great point,
Because
Jeff.
why?
Well, that's
Tell us the physiology. Come on, I know it's a little bit different, but it applies.
So when you're sedentary, let's say the exercise is you're walking to your mailbox. When you start walking to your mailbox, it's very challenging. At first, maybe you're a little out of breath, just getting up off the couch, a little out of breath. Again, extreme example. But eventually, you're going to get used to walking to your mailbox. And then change stops happening. You get used to it. You adapt to it. So you have to introduce new stimulus, new challenge, so your body continues to grow.
Continues to do things. And I think it works the same way in faith, is why I
Yes.
asked it. Because we can get in such a routine that we don't shift. This is why I love missions. This is why I love mission work, because it puts us out of our comfort zone. No one ever became an elite athlete in the comfort zone.
No. And that's what God does. He continues to push us out into relationships and interactions and places where we're challenged and we have to depend on Him.
Cool. Awesome. Patrick, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
You're welcome, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, let me grab that. Wow, awesome stuff. The Winter Olympics are coming up, February? Somewhere. So I watched Skeleton. I always liked watching it, but I'm like, those people are crazy. Absolutely crazy. Let me take you to the 1960 Olympics in Rome. Some rules changed after the 1960 Olympics in the sport of swimming. Up until that point, they had it had 3 watches at the end of each lane, and there were touch pads, but it was all done manually on the side of the pool. You had to, okay, here's the gun, I push start, and then when people started stopping, I don't know if there were 8 people or how that worked, but it was still fairly manual. And in the 1960 Olympics, Lance Larson from the U.S. was the top 100 butterflyer and the top 100 freestyler going into that Olympic Games. And it was pretty much a dead heat between him and an Australian named Devitt. And the way they did it was you had place judges if there was a controversy around the times. And so 2 of the 3 first place judges had Devitt first, and 2 of the second place judges put him second. Of the 6 officials, 3 thought the Australian had won and 3 thought the American had won. So what do? You go to the times, right? Larson had a 55.0 seconds, 55.1, and 55.1 on the watches. And Devitt had 55.2, 55.2, 55.2. Despite all the evidence, Devitt was awarded the gold in an Olympic record of 55.2 thanks to a vote cast by a referee who technically did not have a vote. And Larson's time was changed to 55.2. The rules changed following that debacle. You have to compete according to the rules. Competing according to the rules means, in part, that you're obedient to what God calls you to at home and at school and at work and in your marriage and in your relationships and in the sports. It's a daily thing. It's everywhere. It's not, well, I'm going to be a Christian over here, but when I get over here, I'm not going to be. One of the places we could have gone with our conversation is, how do you be a Christian and an elite athlete? It's totally possible. Looks different than somebody that's not, but it's totally possible. An athlete who broke the rules of competition could not be crowned in the early days of the Olympics, nor in our day. Plenty of people have been disqualified for not competing according to the rules. In fact, in the ancient Olympic Games, athletes had to swear before a statue of Zeus that they had strictly trained for the 10 months prior to the Games. There were rules about how you trained. Similar, today's elite athletes devote their entire lives to living and to competition, to training and to competition. Yet athletes can be disqualified for breaking a major rule. Back in AD 65, the Emperor Nero had the games shifted from AD 65 to AD 67 so that he could compete. And you competed in all of the things in those days. If you entered the horse racing or the chariot racing, there was the 4 horse and the 10 horse, and you competed in all of them. And during the 10 horse race, the emperor fell from his chariot and was unable to finish, but was nevertheless awarded the crown. The officials simply argued that had the accident not happened, the Roman emperor would surely have won. Nero's Olympic achievements were later removed from public records, and the Games of AD 67 declared null and void. The intervention had been too obvious because Nero had paid the judges a hefty bribe and also awarded them Roman citizenship. And yet we hear similar stories today, do we not? Of ice skating judges and gymnastics judges being bribed. Paul, the author of this letter to his young protege Timothy, wrote the letter in 67 AD. It would have taken months and years for the letter to circulate around the churches. But I just wonder, did they know about the scandal of the 67 Olympics? I think they may have. And all of a sudden they get to this phrase: you don't get the crown unless you compete according to the rules. They would have known this. Helps us understand the context. If leaders are to endure, they must conduct themselves in private of their personal training the same way they do in public. Life and leadership has to be in line with the rules of the Scripture and the Christian life. If not, they will not endure and disqualify themselves. Paul is saying if you want to win the ultimate crown, you must separate yourself and work hard. Don't get tangled up in sin, he says. Make sure you please your leader. Live up to the recognized standards. A headline of an AP story many years ago said, "Marathoner loses by a mustache." It appeared that Abbas Tahami of Algeria was an easy winner of the Brussels Marathon until someone wondered where his mustache had gone. Checking eyewitness accounts, it quickly became evident that the mustache belonged to Tahami's coach, a man named Bensalam Hamiani. Hamiani had run the first 7.5 miles of the race for Tahami, then dropped out of the pack, disappeared into the woods to pass along the number 62 to his pupil. They looked about the same, race organizers said. Only one had a mustache. It's expected the two will never be allowed to run in Belgium again. How do we run this race of faith according to the rules? Paul starts out and he says, strength in grace. This is how we start. Grace is unmerited, unearned, unrepayable favor. It's a blessing, it's a gift, but how is it a strength? Running the race of faith requires us to remember that we live by grace. In other words, grace means that failures aren't final and mistakes aren't the end. Grace. This is what matters. This is what's different. Grace means I'm not defined by my past. Isn't that good news? I'm not defined by the stuff that I used to do. Wow. That rule of forgiveness, if you will. I can even run the wrong way sometimes. But in the end, I can be better. This is strength in grace. And then Paul goes on to say, raise others up. Pass on what you've learned to others. Pay attention. Last Sunday, I went to Kohl's because we had $10 Kohl's cash that was expiring, and I had holes in my black socks because I sometimes walk to the mailbox without my shoes on. And, well, of course, if you walk to the mailbox without your shoes on, you're probably going to get holes more quickly in them. And so I'm getting my socks, and I had a park shirt on, and the lady was checking me out. There was nobody else behind me. She said, "What's the park?" And I said, "Oh, it's a church." "Well, where is it?" And I told her where it is, and I said, do you have a church?" "No, I just moved from," I think she said Chicago. And I'm kind of scanning. I'm going, I don't think she showed up. And she said, "Well, maybe I wrote it down." And I said, "Would love to have you." This is part of running the race of faith. I mean, that's an invitation to church, but it's the beginning of passing on the faith. It's said that Christianity is only one generation away from extinction. That's because God has no grandchildren. We each are responsible for our faith before God. Pass on your faith. Part of running the race of faith is making sure that we pass it on. How many people will you take to heaven with you? This is part of the goal, the end prize. And then Paul says suffering will be involved. When you invite somebody to the faith, don't tell them that part yet. No. I'll tell them when they get here. Suffering will be involved. Work hard. Work to be excellent. Work with single-mindedness. This is what an athlete does. Work for God's goals, not the world's. Work with integrity. Work for the prize. God has set a high bar, and it's not a small thing. It's about suffering. Running the race of faith means being willing to suffer with dignity and strength. Everywhere in this book, Paul refers to his own suffering and tells Timothy that he too should expect it. Not only should he expect it, he should embrace it. This is what an athlete does. This is that image that Paul's going for. An athlete says, "Boy, I really don't feel like doing it today. I'm sore, I'm tired, but in order to get the prize, I'm going to embrace the suffering." This is what Paul is encouraging us in the race of faith. The work, the discipline, the training involved of being a true disciple of Jesus Christ. Embrace it. Accept it as part of the plan. I can guarantee you no athlete enjoys every step, every workout, every painful stretch. But the feeling afterwards is awesome. And the goal at the end is worth it. Often in the Christian life, people try to approach it by figuring out how close can I get to the line dividing my Christian faith from being a non-Christian. Do I really have to be this radical? How do I stay right on the edge? This is not the call. What's the least amount I can do and still be a Christian? Can you imagine an athlete saying that? What's the least I can do and still be good? Athletes don't ask that question. Elite athletes don't. And Paul is saying to us, don't ask that question about your faith. Live close to Jesus. Live close. Push yourself, Patrick said. They push themselves. They get uncomfortable. And then Paul ends this little piece of his letter talking about soldiers, athletes, and farmers. I had to read it a couple of times. I'm like, what's going on here? The race of faith requires the dedication of a soldier, the discipline of an athlete, and the diligence of a farmer. Every athlete learns that he has to deny himself certain things. She has to say no to certain things. You can't just eat any kind of food. You have to give up chocolate sundaes and strawberry shortcake. All the rich, luxurious indulgences that others may be able to eat freely. You may have to sit and eat cardboard while others enjoy something, but you're going to do it because of the goal. The athlete does not indulge in certain pleasures. He doesn't go out for late nights, wild living, revelings, carousings, and drunkenness that others may go in for. He resolutely predetermines that he's not going to involve himself in those. This is what the soldier does. I was watching some farmers. I was driving past some fields, and they were beginning to harvest their corn. Whew. I literally said out loud, wow, that's a hard job. That's a hard life. You got to be diligent. You also have to learn to trust God, because you can't control the rain. The athlete does all of these things so he can win. That's the point. You want to be crowned. They represent a test of our faith, I think, for the Christian. We don't want to lose out on what God has for us. In order to reap God's rewards, we have to run God's race and by God's rules. We don't get to make them up. A Christian is called to say no to things. I mean, need we go to the stories coming out of Hollywood this week? There's rules. There's rules. There's ways people are supposed to act and not act. A Christian soldier has to say no. No, I won't do these things because they lead to destruction. And yes, I will do these things because they lead to the crown. What are those for you? What's the thing that grabs you and pulls you back? What's the thing that won't let you, in a sense, get to that next level? What's that look like for you? What do you need to say no to? What do you need to say yes to? What does it look like to pursue excellence in the name of Jesus? What's your leverage point? What's your next step? Let's pray together.